here. We are very happy to bring you this important discussion around equity and inclusion on Indigenous Peoples Day. And to start us off, I'd like to invite Gigi Stahl to provide a land acknowledgement for us. Gigi?
Thank you. The bulk of Portage County occupies the land of Ho-Chunk and Menominee people. So please take a moment to acknowledge this ancestral land of the Ho-Chunk and Menominee, as well as all sacred lands of Indigenous people.
Thanks, Gigi. Well, I'm Jenny Riggenbach, and I am happy to bring you this topic today. The foundation, we've been committed to bringing themes from the Life Report data to life. And one of the elements of the Life Report is a community survey to better understand the experience of people living in Portage County. And based on that survey, 80% of people feel Portage County is an inclusive community. And the Life Report Committee that included Gigi and Sam, we talked a lot about this data point actually, and noting that while the percentage is high and something that we should feel very proud of, it also provides a good place to lean forward and learn more about the 20% who feel Portage County can improve how welcoming and inclusive we are to all people. This is something that we've been working on at the foundation longer than I've been here. And we're continuously trying to look at ourselves, our own policies, and make improvements on how we do our work, as I know many of you who are joining us today are doing as well. So today we are going to learn more about the Stevens Point Area School District's Alliance for Equity and Inclusion. I am joined by three members of the Stevens Point Area School District: Dr. Sam Dinga, who's the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion; Gigi Stahl, who's the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Program Specialist; and Amanda Zacchetti Mayo, who is Principal with McKinley Elementary. So thank you all for being here. I wanted to also thank our sponsors, the UWSP MBA program, and our corporate convening partners, Delta Dental Foundation and the Century Foundation. Your support is really helping us bring these community lunch hours to life, and we're very grateful for your partnership. Kai-Ying, is there anything else we should share before we should begin our discussion?
Only that this is a conversation, so feel free to write in the chat or raise your hand if you would like to engage with the panelists.
Wonderful. And we are recording, correct? I think we are.
Yes.
Okay, great. So yes, thank you. And this will be recorded for future viewing. So let's get to know each of you, though, a little bit beyond your titles. I always find this is such an important way to start these conversations and give really context to the human element that brings us all to this work. So Gigi, would you like to go first?
Sure thing. So hello, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I'm super excited and grateful to get to share in a conversation with you all. You got to hear my position title, which is really awesome. I'm into my third year now in this role, which is pretty exciting. I often say that my position is summarized by my job is to make sure that kids feel like they belong and all of our staff have everything they need to make sure that's happening on purpose. So it took me a little while to get here in the sense that I didn't really go to school specifically to do this work. But as I've gotten into this job, it feels like there's nothing else. Like this kind of work is the exact kind of work that I'm designed to be doing. So I was am an alumni of UWSP, which was kind of an exciting way to start the conversation today because I got to co-author that land acknowledgement statement during my time at UWSP, which was a really powerful project. Once I got done there, I moved to Michigan to pursue my master's degree in higher education and found myself having a terrible time and switched over to the social work program. And I got fortunate enough to finish up my final internship in my position here back in Stevens Point, where I could continue working to make our community a space where love is sustainable. And that's really the root of how I work and why I work, because we have a lot of really powerful leaders that make people feel like they belong. And part of my job is to make sure that we can sustain that. It's pretty cool.
I love that. Love is sustainable. And the other thing you said, where we'll have to come back to, is providing teachers with everything they need on purpose. So I can't wait to hear more about what that means. Sam, how about you? Tell us a little bit more about Sam Dinga.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here and happy today's Indigenous People Day. I kind of looking around, reading what's happening in different areas. So it's a great day. I think my being in this community for 23 years prepared me for the role that I'm doing, and my previous roles during that time, whether being a student at UWSP or working for the Boys and Girls Club and my role at AIG, I think all prepared me um, for the role that I'm doing today, working with the school district and making sure that we can bring the community in and break down whatever barriers might be put, between the parents and the school district. And it has been a blast, 3 years of learning. I didn't attend K-12 here in the United States, so it's a learning curve for me to understand all the nuances of K-12. But I think I'm excited in this role because it is one of, I think, the very first time that my job directly impact my kids, and that really got me excited. And I continue to meet amazing people. I've always had a huge respect for teachers, and being in this proximity, working with teachers has been an honor for me. So I'm excited to be here today to share what I know. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. And wow, yes, your experience in so many different ways, not just as a parent, as an educator, but also working in the business side and for a nonprofit. Yeah, it's great reminder of all of your experience. Amanda, how about you? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I am proud to be starting my 10th year here as principal at the McKinley Elementary Center. Prior to that, I was in the Verona Area School District for 3 years, working as a director in one of their language immersion programs. And prior to that, I was a high school history, civics, and behavioral science teacher. I think my first love in education has always been being able to have kids be curious about who we are as people, what makes us the same, what makes us different, and how that's affected our world, not just today, but in the past. I was first involved with the study of equity in my master's work, actually through UW-Madison, through their Education, Leadership, and Policy Analysis program, where most of our work looking at policies, looking at school practices, revolved around making sure that we took a very disaggregated view of the education that we're providing to all our kids and whether everybody is getting what they need in order to grow and succeed. And it's been a great lens to look at things through. And it's been a great discussion to have with people along the way in my career as we continue to just talk about what makes our kids all unique and all of them have the ability to grow and thrive. So very excited to be here. I will also say that my undergrad is from UWSP, so I'm one of those rare pointing badgers.
Nice. I don't mean to date you, Amanda, but you did say you've been in the position for 10 years. So what that struck for me is you were working on your master's and looking at these issues of equity more than a decade ago.
Yes.
And so it's this reminder that this is not new work. This is the evolution of a long history of work. And so I look forward to digging it. And it explains some things that you've mentioned in prep for this, like just your expertise and how long you've been looking at these issues.
Yes, since 2006.
Wow. Yes. We're not getting any younger, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, 20th year in education. So no, not at all.
Wiser with it, wiser every day. So the Alliance is focusing on 4 key areas: closing the equity gap, developing teachers and staff, educating the community, and empowering students. Where I'd love to start is on some of that expertise, Amanda. Tell us about the data about what what really helped the Stevens Point School District make this step in forming the alliance?
Sure. Um, having for those of you who are aware with the concept of an achievement gap, that is when some of your student populations do not necessarily perform at the same levels as other populations, and within that there can be subsets of groups and crossover, overlap, all sorts of things. um, in the Stevens Point area public school district, we have historically seen that students within uh, certain areas do not perform as well as what we would consider the larger population. And that would be, if I would talk about the larger population, we would think of students who would more than likely be white, English speaking, and of non-economic disadvantaged backgrounds. And when we look at students in other areas, we do not always see them achieving at as high levels. Sometimes it can be as much as a 10% decrease in what that achievement looks like across the district, say in the area of English language arts. Sometimes it can be significantly more than that. Should also point out that this includes things like students who have special education needs. So our students who would be receiving services under IEPs. Um, Wisconsin as a state has struggled with this. When we look at us compared to the rest of the nation, for instance, our students who are Black perform significantly lower than students who would be considered white as their peers. And this isn't something that is a new trend. It's been going on for quite some time. And what we know is it's not that any of these students have any less ability. It's something within our systems, and it's something within how we look at education as a whole. And it's something that we can address as the professionals and as communities. Um, so
Great,
that's that history on that.
great. Thanks, Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
So Gigi, you talked about providing teachers with everything they need on purpose. How is the data, the history of how, where those disparities lie in our community, how is that informing what are you providing to teachers?
Yeah, I think there's some layers to it. So I think one of them is to like really dive into some of the things that Amanda was just talking about. Because we wouldn't hire a teacher into our district if we didn't believe that they care deeply about kids. So sometimes when you share this information, it's easy to think like, well, that's not happening in my room or that's not happening in my school. And the problem or the challenge rather around equity, diversity, and inclusion is that the way that we end up in the place of being rated low, you know, for the way that we serve Black students as a state in Wisconsin is not a result of us not caring about kids at all. It's a result of us not having a full awareness of how some of our practice systems are impacting the learners in our classrooms right now. So a big chunk of what I do is really just raising awareness to the issue and how it shows up specifically for us in our buildings. And the other piece then is really offering teachers alternative resources or even just phrases or practices for their classroom to implement instead. And we do that by way of trainings. We've done a lot addressing bias specifically with staff and continue to do that. And then just providing people with replacement content. So, for example, on a day like today, I've gotten to work with some of our elementary teachers to change the way that they teach about Columbus and Columbus Day versus Indigenous Peoples Day, and finding ways to do that in a way that's age appropriate and still an engaging and interesting lesson for kids.
Great, thanks, Gigi. And this, I know both you and Amanda talked about Black kids, and I'm sure that there's a question of, well, how many, is this just about African American children, or is it about a broader spectrum of children? Can you maybe any one of you really just talk about a little bit more about who who's the focus of supporting teachers to improve how they're working in their classrooms?
Well,
But
I can say that it's by no means um, just one racial or ethnic group. As a matter of fact, we take a look at data, especially for our students. I mentioned earlier, students who would be considered with special needs. And the data on that shows a significantly higher gap between that of their peers. So focusing time with staff on making sure that everyone has that equitable access to the classroom environment and materials and training on how to ensure that people are able to design and present curriculum in an accessible way and in a way that, and this is a big word that Gigi has really helped us focus on this year, creates a sense of belonging. Because engagement factors tend to have a very predictive value on student success. Um, and we can take a look at the fact that we also have a higher percentage of English language learners in our district than we have in years past. And the demographic within that is not necessarily the same as it was, say, 20 years ago. I can use McKinley as an excellent example of that. The district average for English language learners is about 6%, and my building's average is 12%. And when I first came here 10 years ago, 90% of those English language learner students, or as I'd rather prefer to call multilingual students, um, were of Hmong descent. Now at McKinley, we're looking at it being about 50% of Hmong descent and then 50% of Hispanic descent. So it's a really interesting reflection of our community's changing demographics. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily impact just one group.
thank you for that. So Gigi, what is it? What do you mean when you talk about belonging?
Yeah. So I want to say two things, because in that last question, I think an important part to remember too is when we're creating programs to support the kids who need the most support, it benefits every single kid. So to kind of connect that to this idea of belonging, if I have a classroom of 30 kids and I know that 10 to 15 of them really do not feel a strong connection to their peers, to me as a teacher, or to the content that I'm delivering, I might shift my curriculum and timing in my classroom around a little bit different, which is what I've talked to teachers about, so that I have an opportunity to really get to know the kids that are in my room and give them an opportunity to get to know one another so that we can learn better. Because I think sometimes it's easy to forget how scary it can be to be a learner. Like when we go into classrooms as adults to learn something brand new for the first time, I feel this as a facilitator often. I'll ask people, what questions do you have? And everybody just sits there and looks at me, right? Because it's scary to be the person who has to raise their hand and say, I don't understand this. And it's just as scary for kids as it is for adults. So being sure that we prioritize building a relationship where this kid can see me as a full person and not just a teacher that stands in the front of the room, and so that they can see each other as more than just like, well, I know they got an A on their paper today, right? So really giving them an opportunity to see themselves connected with their peers and with their teachers.
And what are you hearing from teachers? I mean, you all talked about being 3 years into the third school year. What are you hearing from teachers in the work that you're doing?
I didn't know Sam was going to talk, so I was going to wait a minute. So I think
he'll get his chance.
Okay, good. I think I hear a lot of things from teachers. I think one of the things that I hear teachers saying is some of the training that Sam and I put together has given them a new lens or perspective to enter their classrooms with. And one of the things that we say, if you see a child differently, you see a different child. And that is not my quote. I don't remember who said it. But it's a really powerful way to change the way you enter classrooms. So I've heard a lot from teachers and saying, like, I tried the things that you trained us on, and I've seen a huge change in my classroom, where they'll say, like, I have a off period, like a plan period, and amount of students and the identity of the students that come in to spend their time with me has changed since I've started showing up in my classroom different. And it feels so good to recognize that I'm having this impact. Because one of the big challenges of people work is we don't always get that immediate feedback from our end consumer, right? That's like, I'm having a good time in your class. Thank you so much for making my experience better, right? It'd be great if we got that feedback every day, but sometimes we never hear from students who feel, dramatically transformed by our work. So when they are able to see some of those things and recognize the patterns, I think folks are feeling really empowered by just the chance they have to create a belonging in their classroom.
Good. Amanda, what are you seeing in terms of the work Sam and Gigi are doing? What's the impact been on McKinley?
I think we see a high level of people being receptive. I had shared with the group earlier and Gigi how one of my social workers had attended a training that Gigi had done regarding bias, and it to have them come back into my building so wide-eyed, full of questions, curious to see what this means for not only them and their practice, but for us as an organization. That's so exciting. Prior to Sam and Gigi, we did have an Equity Alliance group here in Stevens Point. There's been one for about, I would say there were 6 years prior. It's just it didn't have central leadership, and while it was built with great intent, um, being able to have two coordinators to come in and take that intent and take what other people have shown interest and curiosity in and good intention in, and be able to funnel that into something that's more visible, more organized, and with this idea that we can produce measurable results or move the needle in the direction that we need to for our kids. I think that's something that's felt by people because it's not seen as another add-on. It's seen as something that we've known, we've struggled with, and we've just wanted extra help and time and space to focus on and have difficult conversations, but in safe places.
Yeah. Amanda, who started the equity work or that alliance work? Was it at the teacher level or where?
That was mostly at the teacher level. Clover Schmidt, who's no longer in the district, was one of the first people kind of pushing for it. And many of the teachers from SPASH were a part of that. Jen Melville as well, and myself. But really, it was maybe at a time when the district wasn't ready to have these conversations either. And at times you do need to have fresh voices. In elementary education, we call it a new face. Sometimes you do need to have that outside perspective brought in. And while all of us, I can think of myself and Clover and several other people within the district who work through the ALPA program at Madison, that's not something within our everyday, as much as it's a lens that we look at everything through. It's not something that we can sit and solely devote hours and hours and hours to among everything else that we need to do.
It's an expertise, right? Like it is an expertise.
It's a total expertise.
Yeah, I think this is a great place for us to start to hear a little bit from Sam. This idea of central leadership. I think that if in our conversations, that would intrigued you to even apply for the position. Can you talk a little bit about what that central leadership has meant to this work that, as we've been saying, is not new to Stephen's point?
Sure. There's one thing that I really live by, they say how you see a problem is how you seek solution. And as a community, there has been pockets of areas where people have been doing this work, ADI work, calling it different names. And even within the school district, there are pockets of this work that has been done prior to Gigi and I coming to the district. But for us coming in and being that department that should worry about everything EDI and recruit folks and build capacity, that I think has helped in the buy-in. Some of the work that we try to identify is bringing that lens of trying to address systemic issues within the district, and rather than, per student, per school, per elementary versus secondary. We're trying to look at systemic. What are we seeing? And also taking that outside of the district and saying within the Portage County community, within, whatever area we can reach, how we can extend ourselves and bring that awareness, help build capacity to address those issues, those systemic issues that we're finding. And I think that brings us to part of the work that we actually reach out to the Community Foundation to help us fund the learning walk that we are planning. This would have been the very first thing that we would have loved to do when we arrived here, but we had too many fires just to understand our roles, and for the district to understand what we're doing here, and of course the politics that goes with our role being created within the district. So we had to navigate all of that in year one, and by year two trying to develop a coherent plan of action. And this is where we are in year three, hopefully making strides to get the equity, the learning work moving forward. We have a date, we have the funding, and we have the team in place to make it happen. And for those who do not know, this would be bringing outside help, experts to help walk our spaces, classrooms, gyms, libraries, and looking at displays and attitudes, kind of looking at what we are doing to tell us what they are observing, and triangulate that information that they're finding with some of the data that we have through Wise Dash, EduClimber, other DPI information like the youth assessment risk, any data that we have, kind of triangulate that and see what comes out of that, and then help us formulate a solution. Again, a solution to address whatever systemic issues that we're seeing. So how you see the problem is how you try to solve it.
Yep. Before let's dig in a little bit more on the walk, because I think it's the more I learned about it, the more I understood sort of back to this. How are you intentional about supporting teachers to, at the end of the day, serve our children? So I want to come back to that in a second, but I think you hit on a couple of things about timing of your positions that I think is also really helpful to understand, right? You both come into these roles with an expertise in this arena, with specialization in both education and social work, which are really, really remarkable lenses to support an educational system. But it was almost a little bit of a leap of faith, right? Like the district knew they wanted to do this, yet talk a little bit about that. Go back for us a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was interesting how it all played out. The district wanted to do this. They worked very hard to make it happen. The students requested it. They wanted to see a position like this. But looking at the job description that we had, it was lengthy, almost all over the place. And but the search committee, when I walked in and saw the search committee, it was well thought out. A lot of well-intentioned people in the community who wanted to see something happening were part of the search committee. And so and they went through the process, interviewing myself and Gigi, realizing that these are two people with two different skill sets, and even areas of interest. And they were able to work to making it happen that they could hire both of us. So we were fortunate that way that they could make it happen. And now Gigi and I met a couple of times in the early days to figure out, looking at the job descriptions, figure out, how we can support each other, how we can show up in both in the district and in the community to do the work that we're supposed to do. And so it has been a great time. And but for me, it has been amazing. Gigi was a student when I was at the university, and I partly mentored her to come to my office a couple of times for for mentorship, and to see that she became my colleague and working on this stuff. I've learned so much from her. She is a very talented person, and so it's been a great experience for the past 3 years.
So, as I always say, I want to work for these young people someday. Gigi, can you want to add anything to that?
I think thank you, Sam. That was very kind. I think the interesting part about our positions and all work that's being drafted into a new role is there's a lot of effort to get people on the same page as to why something should exist. And when you get together and you have a why or a reason or a purpose, there's a lot of power behind that. And I think one of the really unique parts about our role was that a lot of that why came from student voice. My office is located at SPASD because students explicitly requested that. They didn't want an admin person who was in the central office building that they didn't have like physical access to. So that part, I think, is really unique. But then once we got here, we had to figure out how our jobs functioned and what we were going to be doing. And how is really hard. It's really easy to come together as a group in a room and say, these are the things that we should be doing. And for everybody to be like, yeah, those are all really good ideas. And I absolutely agree. And then people will walk out of the room and you're kind of like, wait, how are we going to pull this off? And so those first couple of years were really us trying to figure out what is it that we really need to focus on and how can we accomplish that as two people serving a whole district with different responsibilities for our positions. So now that we're into our third year, I think we both feel a lot more confident and comfortable about the scope of our roles and what it is that we're supposed to be doing.
Thank you. And I think it's that how, right? And so let's talk a little bit about the learning walk. And for those of you that are joining us today, don't hesitate to drop a question in the chat or raise your hand if you have a question and you want to jump into the conversation. We will work you in. But when you talk about that how, Gigi, what I understand the learning walk is going to be is bringing in folks from CISA 5, correct? So who have been doing this within the school districts within their region and possibly beyond, of actually walking through schools, walking through classrooms and really assessing on what changes we likely need to make to keep up with the pace of change, but also with what how students see themselves connecting to the classroom. Can you describe a little bit more, like what did I miss in that? And then how will you use that information? And how does it get to your how?
Are you asking me?
Well, let's let Sam start. We'll let Sam start.
Okay, cool. I was like,
Yeah, actually, I could answer that. So the way this work, after we complete the work, we debrief with each principal that we go through their school. And just a correction, we're working with CISA 6, not 5, CISA 6 Center for All. So once we complete each work building, we debrief with the school principal. Once the entire work is done, they'll go back and put a report for us and do a presentation. We've selected April 9th as our final presentation. And we'll have this final presentation that will tell us what they've observed, suggestions for some of the things that how we can address some of those things, and possible timeline. Now it will come back to the Alliance members to sit and look at this report and decide, kind of prioritize how we can fix them. And remember, some of those things will be practice, things that we can easily fix. Some of them will be policy that will need to go now, either is it the board, is it whoever, to address some of those policies. Some of them will be behaviors. Some of them, there's all kinds of things that we're anticipating will come out of the report. Now, when it comes to data, that we already have the data, they're just putting it together and triangulating the data to see the different data points to see what pattern is coming out of that, so we can address it district-wide and say, what are we seeing in all our schools? Who are the people who are falling behind, and why might this be happening in our district? And so then we could address some of those things. We have without looking at without completing the work yet, we know some of the areas that we need to address, but it will help to kind of put everything together so it's not just isolated. And also, we are conscious that it's not just coming from Sam and Gigi. If it's coming from all these data points that we have, from the work that we do, then I think it will be a comprehensive report that should be able to inform our next steps.
Thanks, Sam. Gigi, would you add anything?
I think one of the parts that helped me kind of wrap my head around the impact of a learning walk is that sometimes when you're involved in a community, you know, what Brene Brown says, what gets in the way becomes the way. So, like, as an example, if we have like a huge crack in the sidewalk outside of our building, every day you probably just walk around it, right? And we start to build systems to avoid some of these challenges. And when you're present in that every day, sometimes you forget that you've created a solution for a problem, to kind of work around it. So it can be helpful to have, you know, this other agency come in and say, this doesn't make any sense that you have this whole system built to have people walk around this crack in the sidewalk. You should just repair the crack in the sidewalk. But when you are interacting with it every single day, it can become easy to stop seeing the crack in the sidewalk as an issue. And I think that's one of the biggest impacts that we're hoping for from this is just being able to have that new perspective and clear identification of where our challenges are.
And Amanda, will you be one of the buildings that they come through?
Oh, absolutely. This will be happening in all of our buildings. It's very exciting. This is something that a lot of districts in our state have implemented. And what the benefits are that beyond just looking at the numbers that we can pull off of at least a half dozen different data sites, gives us a chance to see how those numbers have manifested from the environment, and to really talk about those things. You know, I had to chuckle a little bit inside when Sam said, well, you know, there might be something easy to change like practice and something that's a little bit more difficult to change like policy. And I would actually flip those two. I would flip those two a great deal, because you can write a policy in 5 minutes and have that off to legal for review. Practice is something that's far more difficult. And when you talk about, Gigi uses the term perspective, or putting that different lens on it and having an outside source say, hey, have you ever noticed this? You're going to get one of two responses. You're either going to hear, no, I didn't even realize that was happening, because, yep, that's the crack in the sidewalk we've walked around for years. Or you're going to hear, I have, but I really don't know what to do about it.
Mm.
I want to do something, but I'm not sure what. So it'll be interesting to really work with people down deep in those results. And the benefit of all of this too, and where I think we're going to gain a great deal of traction, is that each one of our schools have been engaging in continuous improvement planning, and being able to take the information collected from these learning walks and see how it relates to what our school learning objectives are, but also what our culture objectives are.
You know, Amanda, when you describe that scenario of, you know, people will either say, no, I didn't know it was a problem, but I'm guessing more people, they do know it's a problem, but to your point, we don't always know what to do with it, or even how to describe what the problem is. But when it's presented back to you, like, right, yeah, no, that completely makes sense. What are you hoping for in terms of your building, and like the different, what kinds of conversations are you expecting this to help move forward in your building?
Well, we're one of 2 elementary schools in the district right now that are implementing universal design for learning, which is already at play up in our secondary buildings. But Gigi had mentioned how when we see a need for a small population and there's a fix for that, or a way of creating less of a barrier, it creates less of a barrier for everyone. I think that this will help us identify some of those barriers we've really been trying to examine here at McKinley for the past year and a half now, because our early dive into universal design for learning has really been about what are the things that we do without even thinking about it that make learning for kids hard, or what are some of the things that exist in our scope, our realm of impact that we can actually do away of or assist with.
So I'm going to need your help because I'm not an educator. Can you give me what is universal design?
So universal design for learning is about making sure that all students not only can access the learning objectives, but can do so at a high rate of rigor. And that means we do that by one, taking into account what different learning styles there are, different needs, including strengths, because what if your learning need is that you're not being challenged enough? And then designing our instruction, our learning environment, and our school culture around that. Some people think it's about choice. It is. It's about giving learners new ways to show understanding or to obtain material, but it's more than that. It's about rigor. It's about helping people understand what executive functioning skills they need to be masterful learners later in life, like time management, goal setting. Goal setting is going to be a really important one, because that's going to be what helps set that bar for rigor for kids and teachers and administrators and anyone else, really. It makes us think about what are the things we need to provide.
Very good. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. And can you give us an example then of, like, when you mentioned a few minutes ago about conversations that you've already been having as a building, where might some of that this work dovetail with that walk, keep those conversations? If you can give us something more tangible as an example.
Well, I told you how McKinley has compared to the district, we have a high rate of students who are multilingual or from multilingual backgrounds. Last year, in our first foray into looking at barriers, we realized that if we have instructions, if we have rules, whatever it is that's in print, or our visuals are only in English, well, that's rather limiting. Not to mention, it would also be limiting to students who didn't have the same reading level as somebody else. So when you go into classrooms, and even as I walk in as an administrator and I'm doing my regular walkthroughs, to be able to go in and see a classroom that I would be able to look around and know what the rules or expectations were, where my resources were located, and how to ask for help without necessarily even having to know, without having to have a certain reading level or a certain linguistic background. So I got to see some of that last year in our classrooms when we moved into UDL. But by having this walkthrough, having a team come through and tell us how does our building really look like for at something like that overall would be helpful. I can see pockets, but I might not see the opportunities for it to get spread elsewhere. We don't look at it as deficits at this point. We look at it as opportunities.
Very good. Gigi, Sam, anything that you would mention or talk or share with us about conversations that you're already hearing that you're hoping this walk actually kind of coalesces for the buildings in the district?
I think one of the things that I've heard displays, we have paintings on certain walls in certain buildings that were true about the city and the community several years ago, but doesn't look at anything like what our community looks today. So you can easily point that out, but we're hoping that we could tie that with other things that will be observed during this walk. How we display books in the library, how we display, representation in those books that we with how we display them, the shelves, and all of that. Those are things that people have already pointed out to us. Matter of fact, they pointed it out as we were interviewing, and people know we were interviewing for these jobs, but we couldn't come in and start saying, "Hey, look at your paintings." So we're hoping that this work will be saying, "Look at this outside report that is showing, including these. These are some of the issues," and we will help educate folks on why it's important to maybe update the painting or do other paintings to kind of show the representation of what our community looked like today.
Thanks, Sam. I mean, and that gets back to some of those things Gigi talked about at the beginning of our hour around belonging, correct? Like
Correct. Correct.
this representation matters to how a student feels they belong, and parents. And we have a great question from a parent perspective. Thanks, Neha. And if you want to come off mute, I'll frame your question, but if there's any more context you want to give, feel free. So Neha asks, where do we see how can parents help in this change and bring a more inclusive environment both in school and home?
So I'll take that. And there are two subcommittees within the alliance that I'm hoping that we continue to get parents. Well, the Parent and Community Engagement Alliance subcommittee is one of those subcommittees. And right now we're engaging in two major work that we could continue to use parent help. We're planning a real talk where we're doing focus groups with different parents from different affinity groups, so to speak. So hopefully we can get parents to participate in these real talk activities that will be coming up real soon. And they can help us share the challenges, the unique challenges that they're facing as parents from those specific groups. Take, for example, parents with biracial kids, they might have unique challenges, or parents with Hmong students might have unique challenges that other parents might not have. And it's only by us knowing these challenges that we could find solutions. Also, we're hoping that through this real talk moments, parents could share some of the ways that they've been able to navigate things that could be a solution that we can help and share with other parents. And I've said this in different forums. You've heard me say this, Jenny, about the end user experience. I'm hoping that we could have during this real talk, have parents share with us what we think we're doing. That we might think we're knocking it out of the park, but they could tell us it's not cutting it. And so we're hoping this will be an opportunity for us to learn, hear directly from the parents. And we hope to continue to do this every year, create opportunities to talk with the parents. And I know the superintendent also is doing on point with teachers. That is another way that she's getting this information. So we're trying to replicate this with parents and get information from the parents. We're also planning a hair care event. It's coming up on November 4th. There's a flyer coming out. We're still working on it. But the goal is to provide opportunity for, students of color who might not have uh, a barber shop in town or a place to go get their hair done. Hair care, one of the students told me the other time that when you get bad hair, you get treated badly. And so we're trying to make sure that, because those are some services that are difficult for those students or families to get in the community, we're trying to bring them together, create opportunity for them, work with local businesses so they could educate parents on how to take care of their student hair and give opportunity for the students to get some hair care and um, take care of their nails or whatever the case might be, look pretty and be excited about school. Because when they stress out about these things, it takes away from the time that they're supposed to be learning. So we're hoping, working with parents, we can make some of these programs happen.
So the couple of things you said, hair care date, when is that? November
4th. It's going to be at SPASD, but there's a flyer coming out any of these days. Yeah.
And then the real talk conversations that you mentioned about this being a place that really about parents being able to share their own experiences. How do people get connected to the real talk?
So there's a survey that is going out really soon that will help us know what groups parents belong, and that will help us kind of prioritize what groups we want to meet with first, and then from that survey we'll decide some of the dates on when we want to meet with parents again. We're just finishing up the translations, making sure we can send out um, versions, Hmong versions and Spanish versions to the families. So once that work is done, parents will be getting something via emails and something in the mail to let us know what groups they fall in. And again, there's tons of groups that we identify. And if we didn't identify all of them, just let us know through that survey.
Great. I want to just, and back to Neha's question as I'm reading it again, that bringing a more inclusive environment both in school and home. One of the reasons why I really enjoy being part of the Alliance Community and Parent Engagement Committee, which I know you've invited people to learn more about that too, is it gives me not just a place to understand professionally where the Community Foundation can play a role or be supportive, and also take some of that learning internal to our organization, but it's also a place where sort of secondary, I'm getting really good insights into things I can do differently at home. As a white mother with, my husband is also white, and we're middle class family, and we have 3 boys that we are, raising. I think they're pretty good kids, but there's something also that I'm curious if you've thought any about this yet. I know your primary focus is on teachers who support students to be successful. But even for parents like myself, how do I learn more skills, learn how to have harder conversations in my home so that I know that I'm raising kids who are going to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, so that they can participate in the world. Have you thought about that at all at this point, or is that way out there?
I think we did, because prior to me coming to the district, I know that there used to be a forum like that in the community, but I think they did it in a way where they brought outside speakers to talk to folks, parents in the community. I think I'm hoping that the work of the alliance, as we get some of the things that we're working on cleared the calendar, that we could bring that back where we create forums where we could educate parents, or share with parents what we know. And there are questions that parents have directed to us directly, but we're hoping that we could have opportunities to take whatever responses we've generated for those individual parents and spread them out to the rest of the community. Because if one parent is asking, I'm sure there are tons of other parents out there who have the same questions. And so then also our website we're moving to a different website. So we're waiting. Once the new web page comes up, we'll try to create opportunities to be able to put a lot of information on our website.
Gigi or Amanda, would you add anything?
I think one thing that we can definitely use more feedback on is what are the platforms and avenues that would be most accessible to families in this day and age too. I look at my families at McKinley. They are very, very busy. They work all hours of the day and night. They want to be an active part of their child's education. That looks different in every family. And they want to contribute to their child's education, which means that we as a district, have to be open to what those contributions might look like, as opposed to how they have for the past 50 years. So it would be of great benefit to us to hear more from families about ways that they feel they would be able to engage easier with us. Because again, we may have barriers to that we are not even aware of, that are in existence.
Thanks.
I think a couple of things are helpful here. So when Amanda first started off today, she talked about just being curious about who people are as people. And I think one of the strongest things that I've seen a benefit from in the district is kids who are coming to us from a family that really prioritizes that. So how do you stay curious about a life that looks different than yours versus staying in judgment about a life that looks different than yours? And I think there's a lot of ways that families or friends of families or just influential adults in kids' lives can really model that. And you can take a look at like what content are you consuming in the presence of your children or the children around you? Are you only viewing one kind of family life on a TV show that you're watching? Or are you only bringing one demographic of people into your home? So if that's true, what are some things that you can do to change that conversation or invite different perspectives into a conversation that you can have with kids, whether that's watching different shows, listening to different kinds of music, attending different events in the community, or just having a conversation like, isn't it interesting that the majority of the people who we hang out with are this kind of person? Why do you think that is? Because you don't always need to go out and make a new friend, right? That isn't always the solution, but it can be helpful to kind of have that conversation with kids and really start that at home when that's available. I think the other thing that I would really love is remembering to use your voice. If you live in Portage County and own a home, your taxes help to support our district. We love to hear positive support around our work. And that doesn't happen as often as I would love for it to happen. But we also really do enjoy like constructive criticism. So if you do see a gap where your student or someone who you care about isn't being served in our district, let us know. And you can do that through an email. You can do that by attending school board meetings or committee meetings. But really using your voice to let us know where we need to show up is a powerful part of this story, because that really influences how our work happens. And we can do that better when there's more voices letting us know where we need to be.
Thanks, Gigi. And there's some really great compliments for all of your work in the chat. Yes, really, really great comp. And I know we only have a couple more minutes, so please read the notes in the chat. But let's wrap up, because there's so many things that I can imagine. I've written down just takeaways that we would hope people would take away from this. How about each of you go? Amanda, what are you hoping people take away from our conversation today?
Just that, one, we're grateful for the ability to start this new chapter with the learning walk, because it's going to have a real impact on our school. And I think that that's going to have an impact on our community. And I just want to say, as a professional educator, but also as a community member, that I'm grateful for that.
Thanks, Amanda. Sam?
I just want to share with folks who are listening. When I came here in 2002, it was so cold. I kept asking, why do people live here? And after 23 years, I think I know why. It's the warmth of the people, and I've enjoyed that. That is not without some challenges, but I want to be part of the solution, and I think we all can do it. So I invite folks to be a part of what we're doing. Join the alliance, talk to us, call us, send us emails. Like Gigi said, let us know what the gaps are.
Thanks, Sam. And Gigi?
Yeah. So I think what I hope people hear from this is that the work that we're engaged in is really like, we're looking for a soaking rain, not a flash flood. So I hope that people can see that even when we're not always going to see immediate change in the community or in our students, that there's a lot of work being done, and there's always an opportunity for you to step in and support. And that support can look a lot of different ways. I think one of the great things about equity, diversity, and inclusion work is there really is a prioritization of different perspectives around the table for the work. And everybody has a strength that they can bring to that table. And we're going to be better as a result of getting to know each other's stories and finding ways to work in this together. And that's what's really going to sustain this work in our community, so that it becomes an expectation of what it means to be a community member in Stevens Point or Portage County, and not just an exception to the rule. And that's really what we're looking to do. And it's so empowering to see that this many people logged in to have this conversation with us today. And just knowing, looking at the names on the screen, how much work you all are already showing up to do in the spaces that you have here in our community is a pretty cool feeling to have. So thank you so much to everybody who's been here, and for the work that you do in your families and in your community and in your places of work.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. This has been really fantastic. We could keep talking, I know. And we are going to continue this conversation in our next community lunch hour with a different take on speakers. I think Sam's going to be back. He might not know it yet. But with Ben Neuse, who is Dean of the Mid-State Technical College Stevens Point campus, they're going to be hosting a conference in January. And so in December, that's going to be our next community lunch hour, will happen in December. And Ben and a few other guests will be talking about what that conference looks like, and it'll be open to the public. So if you haven't had a chance, you could go and check that out on their website if you want to learn more between now and then. But in the meantime, thank you all, and we really hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.